Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Gabrielle Luke, and I have the privilege and the honor of serving as the chairperson for the MLK celebration, which includes our Social Justice Awards acknowledgement. And a few things that I'd like to share with you. We'd like to welcome each of you, but our honored guests, as well as our speakers. We very much appreciate that Phil and Gail were able to join us too today. So this is definitely an opportunity for us as a community to come together and to celebrate many people's good works and contributions. This is the 13th annual Social Justice Awards. We established in 2002, so we're very excited. It is sponsored by the Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration Committee, which has a very diverse membership from many departments across our institution. We have over 30 organizations and departments that help to contribute to the two-week celebration that happens here. These awards were established to recognize members of Dartmouth's community for their commitment to the cause of social justice, civil rights, peace, education, health, and environmental justice. This year's Social Justice Awards is co-sponsored by the Martin Luther King Celebration Committee, the Office of Institutional Diversity and Equity, and the William Juliet Tucker Foundation. So to begin our time together, I would like to welcome the Rockapellas.
Mistreated each and every day. Whatever can I do? I'm standing here on solid ground. I sing for the silent people. Lord, hear our sound. Oh. Wondering why blues and blacks and grays are covering the earth. What's the mystery of the dove that she stayed so long away? Why are my sisters singing songs of their pain fathers crying tears of silence so hopelessly. And why should I cry? For freedom when I lived, when I lived a life of liberty. And how can I sing or pain? Sing for all the souls who do not complain, who do not complain.
Thank you. Hi, like was said, we're the Rockapellas. We were founded in 1989 with the mission of spreading social justice across campus and beyond through music. What you just heard was called Why Should I Cry for Freedom, originally by Vita. And the words to that song kind of sum up that mission, which is really the power that music has to share stories that maybe otherwise wouldn't be shared. This next song is called Ella's Song, originally by Sweet Honey in the Rock, and the lyrics to the song are from speeches and quotes by Ella Baker, who was an activist during the civil rights movement. Thank you.
We who believe in freedom cannot rest. Oh, oh. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until the killing of black men, black mothers' sons is as important as the killing of white men, white mothers' sons. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. Struggling myself don't mean a whole lot. I've come to realize that teaching others just to stand up and fight is the only way our struggle survives. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. Oh, don't you rest, don't you rest. Freedom cannot rest. I'm a woman who speaks in a voice, and I must be heard. At times I can be quite difficult.
want to thank the Rockapellas in appreciation, too, for their willingness and leadership as students to remind us that there are many lessons to be learned through the arts, and it's also a way to motivate us to vigorous positive action. So thank you to the Rockapellas. I now have the privilege and the pleasure of introducing to you Lindsay Whalen, our Vice Provost, and I would like to invite you, Lindsay, to please come forward and take the podium.
It's also a real pleasure for me to be here this afternoon and offer just a few brief remarks to honor 5 members of our Dartmouth family who've taken to heart and also, importantly, put into action one of our institution's core values, a sense of responsibility for each other and for the broader world. I also want to give special thanks to President Hanlon and Gail Gentis for being here. They've just returned from a very grueling overseas business trip, and I think their presence speaks very loudly to how important it is to take moments to celebrate this value of social responsibility for each other and for the broader world. So thank you for coming. You know, I think when we're honest, we have to admit that for all the amazing benefits of education, for all of its power to transform, there's also a certain danger that comes with formal education because it can be readily focused on the self, on the individual. And after all, when you think about it, the time at college or at Geisel or at Thayer or at Tuck are very self-indulgent times. Students enjoy the luxury, and it is a luxury, a big luxury, of dedicated time to think and to write and to read and to debate, to plan, to dream, to experiment. These are incredible luxuries for the self. And the attention is really on one's own maturation, one's own acquisition of skills and achievements. So after the 2 or the 4 or the 6 or however many years it takes to earn a particular degree while you're here, it does become easy to take away that Dartmouth credential and use it mostly as a passport to privilege. But Dartmouth's responsibility as an institution of higher learning is not just to impart to our students the knowledge, confidence, and skills that they need to be effective in their chosen pursuits, though that is our responsibility, but it's not our only responsibility. We also have the responsibility to instill in them a deep concern for human well-being. We need to instill in them a passion for involvement in their respective communities, to give them a hunger to fix the things that are broken in this world, and the courage to speak out when they see inequality, injustice, and harm to others. Our honorees here tonight have embodied this charge of social responsibility, and that is why we take a moment to celebrate them. They have done this by tackling some of the thorny issues of our time. They have done so through advocacy for prisoners and for convicted youth, through work to prevent disease and provide fair access to health care, through empowerment of Native American youth to have economic opportunities, through use of public service to promote equality of all people, and through insistence that Dartmouth needs to embody that social ideal to be inclusive and diverse. This is what our honorees have accomplished. And collectively, they've made a difference to a lot of people right here at Dartmouth, across the nation, and around the globe. One of my favorite parts of being a professor, without any doubt, is really those informal moments that I have with my students when I just get to listen to them and learn from them what really makes them tick, what it is that gets them excited to get out of bed in the morning, where they see themselves going, what their vision for the future is. As I was thinking about remarks for today, I was reminded of a set of incredible discussions I had with one of my thesis students a couple years back, Kayla Gaybeck, who is a member of the Red Light Band of the Anishinaabe tribe, just like one of our honorees here tonight. And Kayla spent several days, actually, of conversations teaching me about an Anishinaabe concept, which is called Mino Binab Dizawin, which roughly means living life well. And it's based on the concept that we should live lives that that promote a balance in the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health of our communities. That's what our dedication and passion should be, to build that out into community. Dr. Setrin, Mr. Wells, Senator Gillibrand, Ms. Monahan, Ms. Crabb, I speak for the whole Dartmouth community when I say thank you for all the work you have done to better this world, to bring it into balance, and to exemplify Minot B'ma Dizawan. You have changed the lives of many people, and you've been an inspiration to all of us. We thank you.
Lindsay, thank you for your words and for speaking for the institution as a whole. I would also like to thank Lindsay, and we've not had that opportunity, but in his leadership role in the Provost's office, he ensured that the Holly Fell Satay Award became an active part of the Social Justice Awards ceremony last year. So thank you for that, Lindsay. We appreciate your leadership. Now in this moment, I have the privilege and the honor of introducing Evelyn Ellis, our Vice President for Institutional Diversity and Equity. And on a personal note, for me, Evelyn has long been an inspiration in terms of her grace under pressure and her steadfast lead regardless of what is happening around us. She really has been a voice for us, not only in the wilderness, but a very vivid voice in any space here on this campus when she is present. So I would like to now invite Evelyn Ellis, our Vice President for Institutional Diversity and Equity, to come forward to introduce the individual awards.
Thank you for coming out. I know it's Friday afternoon, and I know two of you are very tired people, so thank you for coming out. Each year, I share a family story with you to start this event. This year will be no different. On April 27, 2011, one of the deadliest storms on record cut a devastating path through my home state of Alabama and the surrounding states. Neither stories nor photographs can clearly describe the power of that storm, nor the tormented lives it left in its path. As a rather seasoned alum of southern storms, even I was not prepared for the pain the 2011 storm would inflict. Historical context, however, would in no way predict its path nor contain its devastation. New records were set, and people all over the South would in some way become connected to that tragedy. Sitting right in the heart of Alabama Black Belt stood the homes of my mother, which was my childhood home, as well as the homes of my brothers and sisters in Alabama and Georgia. At the end of the day, on April 27, both my mother's home and my younger brother's homes would be reduced to small and large pieces of debris, stretching miles from their original foundations. When my older brothers were able to move around, after spending several hours locating most of the members of our immediate family, pulling some from the debris that covered them, like every Ellis before them, they started to put lives back together and help neighbors and friends bury their dead. It was quickly obvious that our lives would never be the same. Amazing things happen in storms, many of them good, many of them bad. My mother's dog, old Snoopy, managed to hide below a hill near our family home and was rescued by my older brother, Harry. In the cold pouring rain and what must have been one of the darkest nights he had ever seen, my younger brother had two dogs, and they were swept away. One of them, named Lucky, how ironic, was taken to a shelter and returned to my brother and his wife, Joanne. Lucky was always a little weird, and this storm didn't help him out. Lucky's city of Tuscaloosa was gutted by this storm, making it the last place for poor Lucky to recuperate. Although my mother's house was a rubble, she had a temporary home near the site of the building of her new home. It was determined that Lucky would stay there. He knew the area, he knew my mother, and he very quickly took over his territory. I went down to help my family rebuild. My brother Harry assigned my sister Yolanda and I a very simple task. We were to take trash from the top of the hill where the new house was going up and take it to the bottom of the hill, put it on either a burn pile or a pile that would be carried away to be disposed of. It was June in Alabama and 100 degrees, making it an onerous task, but we proceeded. When my eldest brother assigns you a task, you do it. We learned this as children, and we still abide by it. At one point, I noticed that several toys and stuffed animals that I had carried down to the burn pile ended up back at the top of the hill near the new house. This was strange, and my sister Yolanda stated that she had not removed anything from the burn pile. We quickly found the suspect. Lucky was strategically taking little stuffed Santa Claus, bears, and other things that he felt belonged to him off the side of the burn pile and back to my mother's new home. My first reaction was to scream, to bloody scream. It is 100 plus degrees and things are moving back to where I moved them from. But I looked into his sad eyes and saw pain that he could not verbalize. He couldn't write it out, and he couldn't express it in any other way but to try to rescue things that were precious to him, things that mattered to a pet that had lost everything he owned. I was immediately reminded of my responsibility to be a voice for those who have no voice, who have no power, but whose pain is as large as my own. I remembered the people who had reclaimed things, places, and opportunities that I had lost through circumstances for which I had no control, and handed me back joy and courage to meet another day with hope. I knew my small task then was to do that for Lucky. I carefully picked a few things I felt he would like, and I left them in a sacred spot. The others, I put as far on top of that burn pile as I could. It was 100 degrees in Alabama, and Rear Admiral Harry, my brother, had given us our marching orders. Somewhere up and down that hot Alabama hill, I reconnected with the center of my own being that was created by so many old voices that told me to work hard for the least of our people, for they are the foundation for our own sense of love, caring, and social conscience. I thank Lucky for that lesson and hope sharing it with you reconnects you to your own compassion if such reconnecting is needed. You, our honorees, you're the supporters of the Luckies of this world. You've proven that you remain connected to the problems and challenges so many people face, and for that we will honor you. Our presentations of the individual awards. Just for those of you who don't know the story, I'll do it very briefly. The Social Justice Awards were originally conceived to honor members of our community and provide us with a venue in which we may acknowledge and reflect on their accomplishments. They're presented tonight in 5 categories: the Martin Luther King Jr. Social Justice Award, Emerging Leader, the Holly Faya Sataya Award, the Martin Luther King Jr. Social Justice Award for Ongoing Commitment, the Tucker Foundation's Lester B. Granger Class of 18 Award for Lifetime Achievement, and the Martin Luther King Jr. Social Justice Award for Lifetime Achievement. The name of those honorees who will receive the Emerging Leader ongoing commitment, and lifetime achievement have been engraved and added to this plaque. They moved it. And it's displayed throughout the year on the wall outside of College Cafe. A plaque displayed in the office of IDE will bear the name of the Satya Award honoree, and the Granger Award honoree's name is engraved on the plaque displayed within the Tucker Foundation. Each award recipient will be presented with a clock inscribed with his or her name and an engraving of Dartmouth Hall. The gift of a clock was inspired by a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. letter from the Birmingham jail. We must use time creatively in the knowledge that the time is always right to do right. The presentation of these awards will be followed by a panel discussion with the honorees about their lives and their careers working for social justice. So let us begin. I am pleased to present the Emerging Leadership Award to Leah Carney Monahan. During her final year at Dartmouth College, Leah's call to social justice was confirmed by her reception of the Hannah Crosdale Award, which is bestowed upon a senior who makes the most significant contribution to the lives of Dartmouth women. Leah interned at the Women's Resource Center and spent her time building a more safe and respectable college community, in addition to fostering and fortifying connections among campus diverse populations. She graduated from Dartmouth in 1998 and went on to graduate with honors from the Northwestern University School of Law in 2004. Leah has served as a legal assistant at several firms, including the New York Legal Aid Society's Special Litigation Unit. Through the Prisoners' Rights Project, Leah fought to uphold the rights of prisoners and also combated the sentencing of juveniles to life without parole. Leah elaborates on this in a published policy report entitled, Until They Die a Natural Death, Youth Sentenced to Life Without Parole in Massachusetts. She has also served on the advisory committee of the Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth. Through her career as an attorney, Leah Carney Monahan is clearly emerging as a leader of social justice. Could we welcome Leah?
Good afternoon, and thank you to the Martin Luther King Jr. Committee for this honor and all of the other sponsors. It really is a terrific honor, and it's such a pleasure to be here today and to see familiar faces, many of whom I have kept in very close touch with, and some of whom I was just so thrilled to see again today. It's, I think, a particular honor to receive this award at the close of a month that we have spent celebrating a man who was a truly exceptional leader, whose writings and whose actions have held on to their strength and frankly to their urgency for 50 years now. And I was thinking back a bit on the start of my work in social justice, and in particularly racial justice, and it very much began here at Dartmouth. Talk, certainly, sometimes a lot of talk, challenging talk and important talk, but also political action. And one of the things that I'm most grateful for is the opportunity that I had as a student to find fellowship funding and essentially go out and test what I was learning at Dartmouth in the rest of the world, because I think, as some of the earlier remarks kind of touched on, this is so much a bubble, and it's a wonderful place to learn. But what I remember most about the sort of off-term and then returning experience was this feeling that I would drive across the country and strike out to the other side of the country and test what I had learned here, working with students, working with incredible professor and faculty and administrator mentors, test what I had learned here out in the real world and meet just kind of more mind-blowing people, and then bring that all back to campus and test what I had learned there here. And I've seen that pattern repeat itself with other students and with my sister who recently graduated from Dartmouth, and I think it's just an incredible pattern. It's an exponential pattern, and I think it holds great promise and was a wonderful way for me to learn. So thank you for that.
I'm pleased to present the Holly Thea Satea Award. And that award this year goes to Christine Crabb. Christy is a freelance editor and former assistant director of conferences and institutes, and has provided significant service behind the scenes in support of inclusivity and diversity throughout her years at Dartmouth. Christy is one of the many employees whose individual and collective efforts help the college to thrive, but who may not be as visible or recognized for her work as her more public faces. One example of Christy's contributions is her 16 years of service on Dartmouth Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration Planning Committee, focusing on program development, event management, and logistics. While sitting on the committee, Christy successfully fought to maintain adequate funding for events that center themselves on the dreams and visions of Martin Luther King Jr. as the celebration grew over the years. Her dedication to King's principles has helped transform these and other college events into more inclusive community experiences. For her years of commitment and contributions to many of Dartmouth's observances, whether honoring Dr. King's legacy, celebrating academic achievement through commencement, or honoring Dartmouth employees during the annual Service Awards ceremony, her accomplishments have helped make the Dartmouth experience that much more engaging for many people. Please welcome Christina Crabb.
Thank you so much, Evelyn. So I never expected to get one of these awards in a million years. I was so floored when, when I found it out. The Social Justice Awards are really special for me. They're one of the reasons that kept me on the job, kept me inspired to do that, to be able to help honor people like Leah and Kirsten and Martin. It's a big honor to be able to interact with folks like you, and to help let you know how valued your work is. So through my events, especially the Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration and the Social Justice Awards, I had the opportunity to work with and learn from a lot of incredible people. One of these is Holly Satea, which after whose award, the award is named after her. And I think everyone here knows how inspiring she is, and to be given an award with her name on it is a big deal for me. Other colleagues I've worked with and been inspired by include everyone on the Martin Luther King Celebration and Social Justice Awards committees, people in IDE that I've worked with include Giovanna Manafo, who's here and who was really, really wonderful to work with. It's really special to me that you're here. Ozzie Harris and Connie Pryor were other folks that I worked with when I was working with Giovanna, and especially Gabrielle and Molly and Evelyn. It's really been wonderful working with you. Folks from my office that I've been really lucky to work with. We've really had an incredible staff the entire time I've been here. I feel like I've been really lucky. I've had two really great bosses, E.J. Kiefer and Ann Malenka. I've learned so much from you two. Thank you so much. Now I'm just gonna read a list, but everybody's so special to me, I really had to do it. Kathy Johnson, Kathleen Cunine, Brenda West, Jenny Crowley, Jen Merritt, Judy Bowden, Lauren Frank, Chris Lockenauer, and Dee Dee Roy have been people I've worked with pretty closely over the years. Everyone in our logistics office, they're just absolutely the lifeblood of events. We couldn't do anything without them. They're really, Julie, Laura, Nancy, Randy, and Jim are really wonderful. And then I really especially wanted to thank Megan Porter and Kristen Post, who've really, they always go the extra mile to make events really special, and they've been really supportive of me in a couple of tough years. Thanks to everyone for being wonderful friends, colleagues, inspirations, and role models, and I miss working with you already. And I can't sit down until I thank Christopher, my husband, and my wonderful daughters, Fiona and Cece. They have not seen very much of me in December or January for a large number of years because it's really my very busiest time of year. I've worked very hard on these events every year. So thank you for giving up so much of your time with me to help me support all of our Martin Luther King celebration events.
I'm pleased to present the Ongoing Commitment Award to Senator Kristen Gillibrand. As a student at Dartmouth College, Kristen interned at Republican U.S. Senator Alfonso D'Amato of Albany office. She graduated magna cum laude in 1988 and went on to graduate from UCLA's law school and passed the bar in 1991. 15 years later, Kristen Gillibrand was then elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. Gillibrand has served on the following committees: Committee on Agriculture, serving as the chair for the Subcommittee on Livestock, Dairy, and Poultry, the Committee on Armed Services, Committee on Environment and Public Works, the Committee on Foreign Relations, and the Committee on Aging. She became Senator Gillibrand in 2008 after being appointed to the U.S. seat vacated after Hillary Clinton's ascension to Secretary of State. During her first 18 months in the U.S. Senate, she was an important part of the successful legislative campaign to repeal the military's Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. Additionally, she proposed legislation that would remove sexual assault cases from the military chain of command in 2013. Her work in this area has been fierce in support of victims. Senator Gillibrand also became the first New York representative to support same-sex marriage following her appointment to the Senate. Senator Gillibrand's ongoing leadership, commitment, and service to her country has made her most deserving of this award. She could not be here today, but we will accept the award for her. Now we will move to the Lester B. Granger Award. This award is going to Martin Citron. Graduating summa cum laude with a degree in biochemistry from Dartmouth College in 1981. Dr. Citron has a distinguished career as a physician and public health professional, and he has executed field assignments that really span the globe. India, Nepal, Brazil, Malawi, Kenya are just among the places he has worked. to advocate on behalf of refugees and combat foreign and domestic disparities, health disparities. He attended Tufts Medical School in Boston from 1981 to 1985 and worked to treat and enhance the early diagnosis of leprosy in Vellore, India. Martin is currently the director for the Division of Global Migration and Quarantine at the United States Center for Disease Control and Prevention. For over 20 years, he has conducted research globally, developed global health policy, and has led domestic and international outbreak investigations. He is an internationally recognized thought leader in global health, whose public policy work, his advocacy, and his practical evidence-based interventions have reduced health disparities for communities of color and improved the health of thousands of individuals around the world. He embodies the highest commitment to global public health, and most of all, compassion, as outlined in this MLK Lifetime Award. Please help me welcome Martin Sichuan.
Thank you. I'm truly humbled and honored to be here and to be in your presence and the presence of the other honorees and many who've come before. I'm grateful to so many I can't even begin to describe. And I think, as Leah mentioned, Martin Luther King, mentioning others like Nelson Mandela, whose recent passing reminds us of the importance of servant leadership and the gratification that comes from engaging in servant leadership. And there's too many people. Most of the accomplishments people read that was just read about me is really attributed to a vast community of folks whose commitment and passion I admire and inspire me every day. It sort of takes my breath away to be back home here on campus and be recognized in this way. I want to thank my dad, who made a long trek from Sarasota, Florida, through Atlanta weather, all the way to Boston on the coach, just for a 24-hour visit to come and be here with me. And also my son, who also inspires me, who's a Dartmouth sophomore, Josh, class of 16. So together with you all, I'm honored and humbled and look forward to further work with you. And Lisa, I'm so glad you're here. There's so many people on campus that have been important parts, of my career development, and I think we'll get into a little bit of that in the panel discussion. But Lisa Adams is among the many who inspire me regularly and invite me often to come to campus and teach. And I'm grateful to you, Lisa. Thank you. Thanks very much.
In recognition of his legacy of service, I will now present the award for Lifetime Achievement to Andrew Wells. Andy Wells has been described as a Renaissance man, inventor, educator, and job creator. In 1989, Andy started Wells Technology and has grown it into a multi-million-dollar business. Before that, he led a successful career in industrial technology and has taught at Bemidji State University for over 17 years. In the late 1980s, Andy took a leave of absence from the university to serve as a consultant to various electronic companies, including Magnetic Peripherals, Inc. and Control Data Corporation. He has over 100 inventions, of which about a dozen are patented. Wanting to advocate for youth in his community, the Red Lake Indian tribe, Andy used his skills to create jobs. Andy would observe, whenever I drove through our reservation community, I would see young people out of work. I knew that these were good people who could be successful if they had job training, life skills, and opportunity. In 2005, Andy created Wells Academy, an apprentice training program to help train disadvantaged Native Americans and give them valuable work and life skills. One goal of the academy is to create an environment where the students can see themselves as part of the manufacturing and industrial world rather than outside of it. Andy has always enjoyed farming, teaching, manufacturing, sales, and helping those most in need with job training and life skills. His work as an inventor, an educator, and job creator has exemplified the ideals that Martin Luther King inspired. Please help me welcome Andy Wells.
Well, since she said I'm an inventor, and I didn't know she was going to say that, but thank you, I better show you an invention. So I didn't plan on this, but I'm going to show you anyway. A lot of times when you get older, you have a little bit of trouble bending over to tie your shoes, or if you have arthritis or hip joint replacement. So I decided I'd make a device that would go across the strings on your shoes, and you don't have to tie them. You just slip them off like this. Just a little metal thing. You slip your shoe off, and then you just snap it down. And so it's fun to invent, and I have a lot of good time with that. But America is a place where dreams can come true, and thanks to great places like Dartmouth, I had an experience here when I was 60 years old, back in 2004, that was a paradigm shift in my life. Thanks to the work that all of the folks here do, the faculty and administration and staff, and folks like Len Greenhow, who offer the minority one-week business program, I was able to attend. And I came looking for academic guidance because I was struggling, working hard, going to bed at night with 14 employees, worrying about cash flow and things like that. And through that week, what I began to realize is life is as much about giving as it is getting. And I began to hear this in the lectures, and then some of the folks, especially Ellen Smith from Dartmouth business group over there, talked about some of the ways that she felt it was important to have balance in your life. And as I went home, I began to think about that. How can I give more when I've been so focused on getting? And our whole civilization seems to be, we got me, myself, and I. And as you go through your life, you struggle with your family and so on. And then you get into all the new technology, the iPhones, iPads, iTunes. It's all about me and I. And Ellen began to talk about beyond that, living for a cause greater than ourselves. And I went home, and we had so much around us that was a cause. With 60% unemployment, there was a lot of need, and a lot of our folks had fallen through the public system, and they were experiencing everything from early pregnancy to prison time and high school dropout. And so I began to focus on helping those folks. And that's how that Wells Academy got started, and a lot of other programs that we now do. And I found out that I don't go to bed worrying about money anymore. I let my son do that. I worry about how can I give more tomorrow? What can I do for people? And you remember the smiles and the things that people give back to you. And I found out you can't possibly give away what you have. It's like a smile. You can walk down the street and give it away, but it keeps coming back. And what you give away doesn't always come back the same way, but it comes back in good things in your life that happen. And since Dartmouth and many, many other people in my life have been so gracious to give me, I feel a strong commitment and opportunity to give back to other people. So that's become a new direction for me, and hopefully it sets a model for a lot of other people in my life that will point them in that direction too. Thank you, Dartmouth. Thank you for the privilege of having that opportunity for me to change my life in a better direction.
Now we get a chance to hear other things from these wonderful people, and then we get a chance to ask them questions. So I want to begin our panel discussion, and all four of them have questions, 4 questions they're going to address. And the questions that we ask them, and I'll remind them because I know they may not remember all of the questions, so I'll remind them. There are 4 questions they're going to address, and in any manner that they choose. The first one was, what have you most wanted to change through your life's work? Did your passion for social justice have roots in your Dartmouth experience, any amount of time you spent here at Dartmouth for any reason? What one lesson have you learned about social change that you would like to share with us? And the 4th one was, how do you sustain the passion that you bring to your work? How do you sustain the passion? And each speaker will have about 5 minutes to address those questions. And then when we're all done, we will get a chance to ask them questions. So, yeah, why don't you start us off?
Thank you. So I'm not sure if it was totally clear from the introduction, but on a day-to-day basis, I'm a trial attorney in essentially the public defender's office in Boston. I work out of Roxbury, which is a sort of small community in the Boston area. And what that means is that I am appointed to represent folks who are charged with crimes who do not have the funds to pay for their own attorney. And my work takes place very much at the intersection of race and poverty. And what I think I most wanted to talk about today is trying to shine a light on and do as much as possible to stop what is, frankly, the lawlessness that happens at that intersection every single day. And I saw that lawlessness and knew of it and learned about it as a lawyer, and it wasn't long before I understood that there was something that could be done about it. And I'll share one story of a trial that I recently had that I think is a pretty great example of the drastic harm that can come from that. And I actually think that it's a particularly timely thing to be thinking about today, because we had the very unexpected, I think, announcement from the mayor of New York City today and from the police commissioner there. The police commissioner uttered words from this particular man, Bill Bratton, that I never thought we would hear him say. He said, "We will not break the law in order to enforce the law," which is a powerful commitment. We can only hope that they stand by it, but certainly putting an end to stop and frisk in New York City is a major, major step in the right direction. So just on this sort of everyday lawlessness and the great harms that can come from it, in April of last year, I was about 5 months pregnant, and I spent a month trying a very serious double-stabbing armed robbery case in which a boyfriend and girlfriend, a black man and a black woman, were charged with stabbing an older black woman who was disabled walking down the street with a cane alongside her home health aide. So they were walking down the street, 2 people came up to them, stabbed them, and stole the woman's purse. It had very little money in it, but it had some money in it. And both of the victims, they survived. They were badly hurt. They spent time in the hospital, but they survived, and they were able to look at photo arrays, and they were asked to make identifications. And both my client, I represented the male who was charged, and his girlfriend was also charged. My client was picked out of the photo array by both of the victims. Neither of the victims could identify anyone from the female arrays they were shown. The police reports and the investigation all evidence that statements were taken from the victims where they described people, their assailants, in a way that matched almost exactly, in significant detail, my client and his girlfriend, though she was never identified. And they both said that they saw the girlfriend at a rent-a-center, a store, before they were assaulted, and that they recognized her from that store when they were assaulted. So the combination of my client being picked out by two different people from the same photo array, the memory of being in the store before the event, and the fact, critically, that both victims had consistent descriptions of people who sounded very much like my client and his girlfriend, meant that these two were charged with very serious crimes and held on incredibly high bails. Now, the girlfriend had no criminal record. She had 4 children, and she was living in subsidized housing in Roxbury. All of her 4 children were grade school age. She was held originally on $100,000. More evidence came out that was favorable to her in the sense of distancing her from the alleged events, and it was reduced ultimately to $20,000. The family did everything they could to come up with the bail. Nothing could be done. Her children were moved down to Florida to live with an aunt. She lost her housing, and she was incarcerated for a year. Fast forwarding to the trial, we're in day 15, and I cross-examine the lead detective. The prosecutor has waited until the very end of her case to put the detective on the stand. I ask him if he did an interview of the victims in the hospital immediately after the event. He says that he did. He has never disclosed this interview before. This is the first I've learned of this interview. On cross-examination, I ask him if he took any notes. He says that he did. He hasn't given these notes to me. He hasn't given them to the prosecutor. He's never told anyone about these notes before. At a recess, the judge orders the notes to be provided. The notes show that the descriptions given by the victims at the hospital after the incident were actually very different in important details. Originally, it was 5'8". In the police report that was submitted to the judge at the time of the charging, it became 5'4", the girlfriend's height. Originally, it was a blonde weave. It became short black hair, the girlfriend's hair. Originally, it was light skin. It became dark skin. Obviously, this was a game changer in the case, and both were found not guilty, which was absolutely the right result. There were partial alibis. The victims' identifications broke down significantly during the trial. But the trial was a year later, and had that detective simply let the process work in a truthful way, rather than exercising and abusing the power that he had so flagrantly, would she have been held on $20,000? Absolutely not. If a judge had had that information, it would have been entirely different. So it took a year to get to that truth, and she lost so much behind that year. But it's one of the small examples of the situations and sort of the small untruths and the small abuses that lead to such incredible harm if we're not watching. I mean, you could imagine she would have had significant motivation to plead in that case she was offered a very good deal to plead and in order to, reunite with her kids. But she didn't because she was innocent. So I would say those are some of the chief evils that I would focus on.
All right, so one of the questions is about whether our passion for social justice has roots in the Dartmouth experience. I actually learned a lot from my husband, who was dating one of the really big deal campus feminists when I first met him. And I learned a lot from him that he'd learned from her, so that was pretty, I had a really good experience here. Just, going to, marches and that sort of thing. And then also I was on the Rape Education Action Committee the year after I graduated, and that was really important to me and inspiring me. Are we doing the questions one at a time? Or?
I sort of lost track
Okay.
and told a totally free-ranging tangential story, so I apologize.
And that is perfectly okay.
Yeah.
I think that we're supposed to answer each
Okay.
of the questions as opposed to just go off.
Okay, I just wanted to
Yeah.
make sure I'm doing it in the right order.
Chris, one thing I could ask that I'm just curious, 16 years on that committee, how did you sustain your passion for your work?
It's when you're doing work that honors people like the people here today, that was just really important to me. Being able to be a little bit of that meant a lot.
Excellent.
And it's asked, what's one lesson that you've learned about social change that you'd like to share? I feel like it's just really important to stick your neck out and do things that might get people mad at you. So I do volunteering with a game convention, board games and historical miniatures and things like that. And it's pretty largely male, and a lot of these guys are my very best friends. But sometimes it feels like, I'm back in the 70s with regards to women's rights, and they're all really good guys, but they just don't know all the stuff that I was really shocked, because when I was at Dartmouth, I wasn't experiencing these things. So, yeah, it's just been, you have to say, you have to call them on it, and it's been hard sometimes. People have gotten really mad at me about stuff, and you have to just stick through it. So like I've tried to get the board to do an anti-harassment policy at the conventions, and that's been a really big push, and finally got that to get agreed to. One thing that hasn't been so hard is accessibility, so I try to make sure that accessibility kinds of things are paid a lot of extra attention to for all of my events here and there. Another way that you can do things is when, language in event programs. So again, with this game convention, the people who are there really understand that this is happening in a certain context. A lot of the games could be based on, like World War II or whatever. So I think most of the people there understand that occasionally there'll be something that's a little racist. And it's sort of, like the people who were, it makes a little bit of sense in historical context. They don't really think it's acceptable. But at the same time, it's really hard to explain to them that
not everybody who's going to come here is going to understand that. You really can't have that in your program, and you need to take it out. So that was actually a big push. So just a lot of little things like that every day that you can do. Imagery, you can have an effect on. Even in my copy editing job, I've done stuff with, trying to make more inclusive language, more inclusive images, all of that sort of thing. And then trying to encourage your friends to stand up when something's really wrong too. I was at a sort of a big deal thing, and it was the party afterwards, and toward the end of it, this guy just said something really, really, really awful. And none of the guys there said anything. And I was really shocked about that. So that's my next push, is to get these guys to know that they need to, it shouldn't be only me who's telling this other guy you can't say stuff like that. And back to sustaining the passion that you bring to your work. Just reminding me of the times that I've been successful in these sorts of things really helps a lot. And then every now and then you really need to give yourself permission to take a break. When it's been too intense, you can't take care of every single issue. So take a step back so that you'll be ready the next time.
Thank you.
All right, I guess it's my turn. So,
it is your turn.
A couple of things about what have I most wanted to change. I think that recognizing at its foundation that health is a human right. Health is not an accident of birth. It is not a privilege. It should not be subject to the kinds of inequities that Leah and others talked about, whether they be inequities in socioeconomic status or inequities in race or gender or demography or even in the environment. Health has to be seen in its basic construct as a human right, and not something that is offered as a consequence of economic growth or benefit. It is a foundational. So what I've really concentrated on changing in my life work is identifying, defining, clarifying health disparities and trying to address those health disparities. And there are so many out there, and they're persistent and pervasive and pernicious and easily neglected if we don't concentrate on it and pay a lot of attention. I think that in terms of does my passion for social justice have roots in Dartmouth? Absolutely. It's incredible how much of how I feel really started here in three distinct ways. I'm reminded of the ways in the classroom and the ways professors and mentors of mine impacted that. In particular, had the great fortune of taking some classes at the medical school, which at that time was right on the undergraduate campus and close by, and remember the origins of the Health Atlas Project that has now become so popular and famous. But it took a lot of courage for Michael Zukoff and Jack Wenberg and many of these folks who were at its infancy innovating ideas and defining the fact that there were great differences in health, in diagnosis, in treatment, in access, simply based on geography or the distribution of specialty mix. That was an amazing disparity that needed clarity in addressing, and that I remember distinctly hearing them talk about health system delivery and the four qualities of that: access and equity, cost and quality, and how they were intentioned in some sort of dynamic tension, but we need to look at those really squarely and honestly and face how to provide leveling and reduce disparities. So classroom was a really important part. Peers and colleagues, there's just nothing like the privilege that Vice Provost described. I was moved by your remarks and how right it is. So much of my learning on this campus happened outside of the classroom. It happened with my colleagues late at night in the long discussions, joint experiences, going off term, and then coming back and talking about those, like you mentioned, Leah, that cycle. Roommates, Doug Schwartz, who's a strong legal advocate now for human rights and those issues. Polly Duncan, who was a really strong influence in the early days of the Tucker Foundation in social service. Lydia Herman, Dave Pine, who's politically active in California right now, and so many people who felt passionately about these ideas of inequity and social justice. They permeated my experience and gave birth to a soul that I knew that I was in the right place for learning, and we were on the right track in terms of the kinds of things we want to do. And then the third way that Dartmouth was so critical in that influence was, as you said, the Dartmouth plan, the genius of President Kemeny at the time, enabling a rich year-round operation, but importantly enabling opportunities to get off campus, study abroad, go out there, and develop a real strong sense for experiential learning. Although they were language program based back at the time in the late 70s and early 80s, and they've now expanded, they were true cultural immersions, and I had experiences and opportunities to go abroad through LSA and do other trips that extended from that. So getting out of the bubble, as many people have mentioned, it's such a critical part. And Dartmouth, in all those three ways, in the class, among my peers, and through structural and institutional commitments and designs of brilliant leaders like President Kemeny, made a huge difference. You asked us to think about what's the one lesson that we learned about social change. And I would say that for me, it's recognizing a really powerful cycle that has four components, but they all sort of feedback one into the other. The first is social change needs to be rooted in education. We need to really invest and study problems in depth and get to the base and do deep analysis. I'm impressed by, if there was one thing I could do to really have the greatest impact on health globally, it would be increasing maternal literacy. And studies have shown over and over again, the most important thing you can do for health is give the opportunity to read and write to women, to mothers. And because when that happens, as their instinctual caretaker role, everybody benefits. The community benefits. Their children survive infant mortality. They learn how to feed oral rehydration systems. It's incredible. So the root of social change has to come from education. But it's not enough. Education is not enough. As the Vice Provost said, we can't just sit and debate these ideas. And the next step in that chain is to be initiated by advocacy. We need to be able to be articulate and show leadership, both servant leadership and good followership for those that have been mentors and are leading ahead. And step up, like you said, support something when you see it's wrong. The ability for our experiences here to teach us how to be articulate advocates is really important. But even advocacy is not enough, because after a while, just talking about it doesn't get it done. And as the theme of this week and month has been, social change has to be compelled by action. It doesn't always have to be the whole picture, getting everything done at one time, and it may not even be right, but we have to be compelled and thrust into action. And it's only by taking those actions, reflecting on them, learning from it, iterating about it, that we're going to really make progress. And finally, all of those three things, education, advocacy, and action, they're exhausting. And so social change requires the fuel, the energy of passion, but it also, it's not for the faint of heart. It requires a lot of persistence. You have to be able to face disappointment and all those things. And so I would say that cycle, educate, advocate, act, and then persist even when it seems just hopeless and devastating. And in that setting, the energy that comes from the people that we serve, from the refugee populations on the borders of Somalia and Kenya, or Sudanese, or now the great crisis in humanitarian crisis in Syria, if those people can persist, surely we can. And so they provide a lot of source of energy. And lastly, I think that feeds into the last question you asked, is how do you sustain your passion each day? And I think the sustaining of that comes from people and community, and building a sense of community that happens here. It starts here, but it has to move out of this environment. And for me, I'm rejuvenated by the energy of the people that we work with and serve, the teams that we build, the communities that seem that we're receiving, but as you said, are really giving back 10 times more. And that reflected smile or satisfaction, or the fever that breaks, or the vaccine that goes in the arm, and the measles epidemic that's abated, that is a great source of sustaining passion and energy. It allows me to connect with the human condition on a really fundamental and base level, and it provides a real life-sustaining force. So I feel incredibly lucky and honored to be on the panel with others. I hope I've touched on your your questions.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll give this a try. I'm so short, maybe I better stand up. If you don't mind, I'm going to stand up here and do it like this. One of the first things we were going to talk about was change, and the change I see in our poverty community where we have 60% unemployment is the lack of vision that our young people have. It's amazing with all the technology they have, television, iPhones and all that, that they really live for the day. And just trying to get through the day because of poverty means they often get involved in drugs and alcohol and sex and things for pleasure, but it doesn't bring happiness. And so what I do is, in our little factory, we invite the young people to come by the school bus load. And we usually have around 400 a year that come in, young folks between the ages of like 3rd grade and 12th grade. And we offer them a tour. We call it a career day. But I actually talk to them for about 40 minutes and show them different things and show them the fun of industry and business. And then we start talking about careers and we give them a tour. And it really gets them excited, and it's fun to watch them kind of come alive because they don't hear much about vision in their homes. Actually, half of their parents have dropped out of high school, so there's not a lot of thought about tomorrow. So we try to give them a vision of what they can do. And I tell them, you can't see your whole life. Vision is kind of like driving at night with your headlights. Maybe you can see a little ways, a half a mile, but go that far, and when you get there, you'll see further. So I tell them, just think about your years, the next few years. Stay in school. And we actually started a stay in school program that helps promote that. And we go around the high schools encouraging them to do that. We have several ways. But for the shortness of time, I also wanted to talk a little bit about what Dartmouth did. And I mentioned earlier about the concept of giving. When we were talking with folks like Leonard, and they planted the idea that you got to have the balance. And so I tried to find a way to give because I was so used to getting. And it was kind of like I said, a paradigm shift to start thinking about what can I do for somebody else. And what I found was in my shop, I was turning down a lot of people who would fill out applications, like even at McDonald's, and you put down, do you have a felony? And most of us would say, well, if you got a felony, you can't get a job. And we turned down a lot of people with felonies. And after the Dartmouth experience, 2 weeks later, I was standing in my office, and a young man came in, and he filled out his application. I looked at it. He was a fairly big Native American fellow, and he had marked felony, and I asked him about that. And he said, yes, I was in prison for a year. And I said, well, why? And he said, well, I stole a car. And I said, well, you know, we have a policy, we don't hire felons. And he says, yeah, I thought so. And he probably had heard that a lot because he said he'd been trying for 3 months to find work. So he walked out the door, and I watched him, and I just stood there watching. My son was there too that day with me, and we're just kind of watching him. He walked back to his car. And when he got close, I could see a lady's face, and there, a younger lady, probably his girlfriend, and 2 little children watching him. And I thought to my son, I said, look what's happening. I said, how would you or I feel walking back to our family and nobody wants us? As a man, what does that do to you? I said, we got to do something to help him. And so I ran out and I stopped him before he drove out of the parking lot. And I said, you fill out the application. Why don't you come back next Monday for an interview? Let's see if we can find a way to fit you into our operation. And he did show up. And we hired him, and he went through our school program, and he became a very good employee. Right now, I have many employees who came out of prison, and sometimes people come in and take a tour, and they say, you're hiring felons? And I said, yeah, I do. And I have them here. They're in a training program. They're getting paid a nice wage. They're getting, advancements every day because they're learning new things on modern manufacturing equipment. And they go home with a paycheck every week. Now, where would you rather meet them? Here, when they're part of a team for production, or out on the street, when nobody wants them, they have no money, and they have no future, and you look like a victim to them? And the answer is so clear that we've got to help the people around the very bottom. Some of them are willing to be helped. They need a second chance. And so that's one of the things I've found. One of the lessons I've learned by coming here is to open my eyes to that, to see that. Have you ever noticed when you're going to do something like, let's say you're going to buy a new door for your house, all of a sudden you start noticing other people's house doors. And today I was just kind of walking around the campus and I noticed 14 different styles of doors. I suppose because the campus has been here a long time. But when you start looking for ways of giving back, they're all over. And that's the lesson I learned, is that you don't have to have a lot of money. You can give your time. Sometimes time is even more valuable, or a smile. A little tiny baby has only a smile to give, but just think how valuable it is when you're doing something and that little child first smiles back at you. It just touches your heart. And I learned here at Dartmouth that we can collect and get, our business growing by using our brains, but we can also give back from our heart. And so I started doing that, and it just made my life so much happier. And I was thinking this morning of an analogy, and it's kind of like in my house or in the room I'm staying at, a very nice room at the inn here. Everything is so nice, and the shower is so beautiful this morning. And I turned on the water, and I thought, but it's got to be warm, because it's no fun taking a cold shower. And that's the way it is in business. When you're just there for the money, it's kind of like a cold shower. You can make it work, and it's nice, and you got all that material, but it's not comfortable, it's not fun. And that warmness of a house or a shower or a person's smile makes all the difference. And sometimes the young people don't always come up and tell me thank you. Those of you who are professors know students don't always come up and tell you thank you. But oftentimes the girlfriend or the grandparents do. And that makes such a difference, because they say, you not only changed my son or my grandson's life, you changed our whole family. Because now he's coming home and he's proud and he's got a check and he's a model for our other little kids instead of out on the street. And it makes such a difference. And folks, I guess the thing that I want to leave you with is that everybody can give. Even if it's just a smile, open the door for somebody. Maybe it's a little time to listen to a teenager, or maybe it's a ride to the store for an elderly person. We can all find ways to give if we just open our hearts, open our eyes, and believe in the people that are around us, and that they can be better by us helping them. Thank you.
We do have a little time for questions. There are mics on the side, I believe. Our colleagues will have them so that you can ask a question and all of us can actually hear your question. And our honorees will love to answer your questions. So let's hear that first brave soul that's going to get us going.
Hi, thank you all. I'm curious, when you look back at kind of where you are right now, who would you consider to be like your true inspiration?
Well, this was just fairly recently, within the last couple of years, but I was really especially excited to see that Kirsten Gillibrand was going to be getting an award because of all of her work with sexual assault in the military. So she's sort of turned into a hero for me over the last while.
Yeah.
You want to tackle it, or maybe I'll go? Go for it. So I can't even. The more I open my eyes, the more inspired I am by such a wide variety of people, almost like what we just heard. And at different times, I've taken my inspiration from different folks, whether it's the freshman year professor on campus who offered me an opportunity to do research in his lab, who now, Bob Gross, who I continue to come back and visit and teach with in his courses. Sometimes it's big vision leaders that you see up, on the grand stage, the Martin Luther Kings, the Nelson Mandelas, the Gandhis. But really, there's a little bit of that inspirational spark in all of us. And so even in small circumstances, I find great inspiration by the people that we serve and care for and work with, the people in my office, my dad and my son. I don't know where it ends, actually, and that is just such a great privilege. There's so many sources of inspiration out there if we just kind of open up to them.
Yeah.
I guess I'll take a stab at that question. That's a very hard question because I agree that I think the struggles are so complicated that it's impossible to find one source that fits all. As it's sort of a fact-specific inquiry, as they say, but we've talked a little bit about the bubble. We've used that word a few times, the bubble of Dartmouth, and it sounds like a four-letter word the way we've used it, but it's not at all. I think really it's the opposite. It's a microcosm, but it's a very real microcosm, and I think the joys here are real, and the struggles here are just as real. And for me, in terms of getting inspired and staying inspired and sort of not getting discouraged or overwhelmed, a lot of that learning happened here at Dartmouth. And I want to really echo the earlier shout out to Giovanna Manafo, because for me, when I came to Dartmouth, I needed to find a space where I could not get overwhelmed, and where I could find some pragmatic way to deal with what the struggles were. And at that time, Giovanna, Maddie Richardson, the entire Women's Studies department, that was my safe space. And as I was a Women's Studies major and a African American Studies minor, and there's a lot of theory there, and I think critical theory, race theory, it gets a bad rap as being sort of not the opposite of pragmatic. And for me, people like Giovanna and Ivy and Maddie and others, they actually made the theory real and made it an arsenal. And that has been an arsenal that I've relied on ever since.
Okay. If I understand the question right, it's what inspires us?
Who inspired you?
Who inspired
Who
me? Oh.
inspired you?
Yeah, okay. Well, I got to say Len Greenhow. But his team, he has Ella Bell Smith over there and a whole group of people. And although I was only here for a week, it really made a difference, because at Dartmouth, I could look around and I could hear from other people, you walk the talk. It's easy to say we should do these things, but you have to actually follow through. And I have to do that in my place. You can't just set a policy or say something unless you follow through. For example, if I say, cell phone use, and then I walk through the shop talking on my cell phone on business, pretty soon everybody else thinks, oh, that's okay. And I can't say it's important to have diversity and to create visions and stuff unless I do it. So I have to, in my meetings, give the people visions and show them that I'm doing this. And it's not just good business, it's fun. People want to do things that are fun. So I try to make it fun. And we're getting a whole new crop of people starting to come in, because the people who work with us are starting to tell their friends. And now, I'm starting to get more and more applicants. And so it is catchy, this thing, this inspiration thing. If you feel it in your heart and you live it, other people see it and they want to be part of it. And so I just think you just got to believe in it and do it.
I'm looking at EJ. You get one shot at it. You're a very special person.
Thank you guys for being here, and I want to say I'm inspired by all of you, so thank you. First of all, yeah. But my question is, and you guys, some of you have touched on this already, but a lot of us work with students. A lot of us are here because we care about making this place better. But as you guys know, not everybody is that globally minded, I would say. And some people, do think, well, what am I going to get out of this? How do I make this about me? That type of thing. So could you guys give us some some of your thoughts about how you inspire others to realize that this type of work, that social justice, is not just about themselves, that it's really about making it better for everybody. What are some of the ways that you guys might approach that subject with people who might not care that much, or feel like, well, I have to look out for myself first and then everybody else?
Yeah, I think it's part of character development. The people I work with, have grown up on the streets, so dishonesty and thinking about themselves only, whatever you can get by with is okay. We have to change that, and you can, as I said earlier, you can say it to them, but you really have to live it. And the way I do it is I try to go the extra mile and trust them first. In our shop, I give them the combination to the door so they can come in. We don't lock anything up. And when you make a mistake, you apologize, and you live the right kind of character. One time something disappeared, a little Honda 1,000-watt generator, and I accused them of one of my employees took it. And so I started locking everything up, and boy, that really slowed stuff down when you don't trust people. Everybody's running around with keys and suspicious of each other. Well, I found out later, we got a call from the sheriff's department. It actually was a contractor who was in there doing some sheetrocking that took it. And I apologized to the employees, and I said, I'm sorry. It just looked that way to me, and I won't do this again. I'll be much more careful. And we're unlocking everything. And it changed. They went back. I had one salesman who showed up. He wanted a Coca-Cola, so I went over to the machine, and I put $1 in. He looks at my employees because they look a little ragtag physically because they got tattoos from prison. One even's got tattoos on his eyelid, and it's not a very nice word, so I tell him, don't go to sleep on the job. But the salesman looks at him, all his group, and he says, do you lose a lot of tools? And I said, well, actually, no, I don't. And I said, let's see what happens. And I took a $20 bill, dropped it by the Coca-Cola machine, and we walked back to my office. 10 minutes later, I get a knock on the door, and a fellow named John Fairbanks comes in. He'd been in prison 5 years. And he says, Mr. Wells, did you lose $20? And I said, well, let me check. And before I could get my billfold out, he says, it must be you. I've asked everybody else. Nobody lost it. And typically out of 15, 20 people, someone would say, oh, yeah, that's me. But they didn't, because I think we inspire people by living it ourselves. And that puts maybe, I shouldn't say a burden, but it puts a high standard for us. And people will rise to the standard you set for them. And we got to set a high standard for ourselves. And believe me, even if you're 70 years old, and I know we have a couple other older folks here, we can still get in a lot of trouble. And so we got to set a high standard and discipline ourselves to follow it, because a lot of people are watching.
Well, I agree with Andrew, too. I think the best way to inspire people to, think more broadly than their own instinctual needs is to live it by example. I also think there are periods of receptivity, and often finding the right time to approach somebody to engage with you, and figuring that out is usually all of us go through periods of crisis and vulnerability, and where we really need to reach out. We need the benefit of our community and our company. And sometimes that's a great point of enlightenment to engage others. And most of the time it's pretty lonely to be very just solely self-focused. As you say, it's not really that rewarding. And then as soon as people start to engage in those kinds of activities as a community, I believe really strongly that here at Dartmouth and many places, people are motivated intrinsically, as Daniel Pink says in his book Drive, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Find your sense of purpose, give folks enough autonomy to feel like they can make a difference, and empower them with the tools to master the task at hand. That is tremendously, a very strong source. And I think once people have a sense of autonomy, mastery, and purpose, and that confidence to kind of reach out, they find tremendous satisfaction in social justice. It doesn't become a chore or a task or a box to tick. It becomes a way of life, and it is incredibly self-sustaining in that regard. So you might have to just wait for somebody to be at that little bit point of vulnerability and kind of bring them along. Just one idea.
sort of the same sorts of things. You need to pick your moment and work it into conversation. And, you know, I've had to be antagonistic a number of times, but also, you know, if you're expressing some concern for the person, and that can be really effective.
So I would say that the most success I've had in sort of holding up a mirror to, I think, people who are having a hard time just seeing the boundless privilege that they experience in the world, has been when I've tried to think about how, like, you never learn something so well as when you teach it. And so if I've had some luck in working with, and I'm not going to say that law students are particularly unaware of their privilege, but it's possible. And I have had some luck in essentially, in any given group of law student interns, for example, perhaps identifying the one who seems least invested and tasking him or her with teaching the group something really important, and sort of essentially making them be the leader and making them teach the lesson. And when it doesn't work and it doesn't come off well, it's on them because they haven't taught it. They haven't become engaged enough to teach it. It's a really hard question. It's a really terrific question.
Well, I am going to turn it back over to Gabrielle, but I want to leave a little reminder for all of you that you know already that I'm going to remind you. A visiting student to Tuck from Kosovo asked me yesterday, how did I feel as a child growing up in Alabama when King was killed? And I told her, as a child, I felt as though we had been thinking as kids that Superman was coming. And then all of a sudden, Superman was dead. So, but we looked around, and I know I looked around and I saw my parents, my grandparents, my uncles, and uncles' school teachers, and I realized, no, maybe Superman, Superwoman's still here. You are going out into that world every day doing the things that you do. Know that some person, whether it be a child or someone else, sees you as Superwoman or Superman. Please keep doing what you're doing because we need you to do that. And thank you, and I'll turn it back to Gabrielle.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank our audience for their time and their commitment. I'd like to thank all of you as our audience, so thank you for being part of this. We'll say one of the gifts of this is we do record it, and so that folks know oftentimes these panels get introduced and used in our classrooms throughout, so there will be many more people sharing this experience with us as the year goes ahead. I will acknowledge, this is not my usual role at Social Justice Night, but this past 2 weeks has been filled with many adventures for us. And what I will say, and what I have appreciated about this year's celebration particularly, as we talk about action and being positive, I'm very proud of this institution right now. There's some challenging things going on here. It's been messy, but in messy is where we get to plant seeds. Like the rototiller and the manure go down first before anything starts. And so for me, I'm walking away from this experience in these 2 weeks knowing and seeing glimpses of us truly being an inclusive community. Because if we're being inclusive, that means I need to be able to share the space with that person whose politics are completely different from mine, and still honor and respect and move forward together in action. And so that's my hope for us as a community. Thank you all. Again, we really appreciate your returning and really celebrating this experience with us and punctuating our theme of vigorous positive action, because truly before we have accomplished that and continue to do so. So thank you for that. The joy is we have a lovely reception in the back, which also means that you get to do a little one-on-one time with our honorees and guests, so please take full advantage of that. And again, thank you for being with us this evening.